Awesome. Well, it's lovely to see you, France.
Yeah,
And you know what?
likewise.
It's lovely to catch up. And I was thinking about this as we arranged to talk, that it's almost ironic that we're talking over, video chat,
Yeah,
which is a common thing now and wasn't a common thing before the pandemic. You know,
true.
everybody does it now. A lot of people had to work remote. And that got me thinking about the pandemic and about, life. People had quite an awakening, I think, through the pandemic about how they spend their time. They were sometimes forced to be around family. We had lockdown and those kind of things, and
For
it's
sure.
in the rearview mirror. But it's left an impression on us, I think. And you meet people who they've changed what they want out of life,
Mm.
and they're still trying to achieve it. Maybe trying to achieve it in the same way, but at least they've adjusted their goals a little bit. And I think for a lot of people, the phrase work-life balance used to get thrown around before, but it's more prevalent now, I think. And there's new phrases come out every month. We're
Yeah.
both in business, but I think it's an important thing that people are getting to now is to think about how they spend their time.
Right.
I mean, changes must have happened for you.
Yeah, for sure. I was reading an article that we used to say 9 to 5 and now we say 7 to 7 because we're just like available for work, especially if you're working remote. The lifestyle has changed quite a bit.
Yeah, and but there's another phrase as well, core work hours. So
Mm.
there's core work hours I find where people with the effectiveness if they work remotely, where okay, between these hours I'm available to interact with people, but they also have quiet time, not to goof off, but actually get work done,
Yeah.
creative thinking done. And this to me is where getting things in the right order is just so important to our spiritual life. I sometimes sum it up like this. When I walk into work, if take a job title, if I walk into work, ironically, we're talking over the internet, but am I an engineer, a healthcare worker, an educator, a teacher who has a spiritual life?
Mhm.
Or am I a spiritual person who performs the function of a teacher, an educator, you
Mm.
name your vocation.
Yeah.
And it seems so subtle, it seems almost like a play on words, but if you change that, in fact, we could even use technical term from Buddha Dharma, that basis of imputation on a
Yeah.
daily basis, everything starts to change.
Yeah, it's like how am I identifying myself? Am I thinking that what's like the root of my being? Like you said, am I a spiritual
Exactly.
practitioner that's
Yeah.
going to work, or am I uh yeah, I don't know. Just there's tons of ways we can identify ourselves, and that
Yeah.
that actually changes how we perform any role.
And then I think we start to undo and unravel our habitual thinking that always ends up in a zero sum game, isn't it? The work life balance. I've heard people put hours on what a work life balance is, and it's not hours to me. It's you can have win win.
Mhm.
There's again with people when we're working remote, they're like, hang on a second, the time I used to spend in a car or on the subway, I'm spending doing exercise, spending contemplating spiritual life, and I'm becoming more effective at work.
Mhm.
And so obviously there's been a big return to work and industry's gone back to in some ways gone back to the way it was, but not because people have had that slowdown and that it leaves a mark on us, I think.
Yeah.
And so we can then apply that to everything in daily life. You go to the grocery store. Am I, an ordinary person going to a grocery store to get stuff, or am I a spiritual person looking to get sustenance? I mean,
Right.
I don't know if that quite computes. But once we get that in the right order, then everything changes because we can hear a lot of great spiritual advice. And, we often hear the phrase in contemplative Buddhism, like, how do you take it off the cushion?
Right.
I don't know how many of us actually meditate on cushions anymore, but it's taken it into daily life. And so how do we transform your life? There's a great
Right.
book by Venerable Geshe Kelsang Gyatso Rinpoche with that title. But it's taking it into work and then truly seeing people. Like if you've got that foundation, that simple walking through the door on Monday morning with I'm a spiritual practitioner performing the function of whatever my career is.
Yeah.
First of all, we're less likely to be like galloping horses, just spontaneously competing with everybody else. Someone got attention, someone didn't, etc., etc. And
Yeah.
then we're just taking along with the flow of life. And then we can do all those other things like really value someone who kind of pushes your buttons a little bit at work.
Yeah.
And then, okay, well, they are my practice of patience. But we don't even have to stop there, because sometimes they push our buttons because our strong sense of self is we're not even aware it's coming out.
Right.
And as it comes out, then now we want to compete instead of collaborate.
Yeah.
So we're back to a zero sum game again. You're successful, I'm not. But if I'm successful, you're not. Oh, no, I feel bad now. But if you're successful, I become jealous. And so we have jealousy. All these things just from that foundation.
Yeah, and it comes back for me to the underlying motivation, like why we do what we do. And that's very much related to that sense of self. Like why are
Yeah.
you at work? And if it is a like you said, an ordinary sense of self, right? Like I'm there to get ahead, and that's our like framework in which we work, then we're going to be, as you pointed out, like getting jealous of other people and super competitive because that's the lens in which we see ourselves in our job.
Yeah.
And there's sort of a thought in society that kind of attitude maybe can get us ahead, but I would definitely argue in my own experience, the attitude of I'm here to help everyone here be successful can be just as successful in the workplace because I can see myself as how do I enable other people? How do I give people opportunities? And you grow by helping everyone grow around you. You especially like getting promoted to a leader. You do that by helping lift others up, by cherishing others, caring about, what they're interested in, giving them opportunities. So, yeah.
There's irony in it. We can become jealous of people who seem to cruise through life. Like, well, why does it keep falling into their lap? And then so we double down on our negativity if we're not careful.
Right.
But we can be like them. So we're not. And I'm probably going to quote multiple teachers from our tradition because I'm a good fortune to listen to multiple teachers from our tradition. Kadam Morton emphasizes identifying with our potential. So if I go into work as an engineer with a teacher with a spiritual life, I'm not really identifying with my potential, I don't think. I don't want to quote him out of context, but if I identify with my spiritual potential and then everything sits on top of that, now I really am identifying with my true potential, which everybody has. And so therefore,
What does that mean for you? I'm just curious to hear because that's a very Kadam Morton does talk about that a lot. But what does that mean for you? Like identifying with your potential, specifically like if you're going into your work, how
mhm.
does that sort of like play out in your mind?
Well, if we get it it's pretty easy to begin with the wrong, how I get it wrong, and that's identifying in my skills, my title, my position, etc., as very crunchy, solid things that are not ephemeral. They're very solid, and
Right.
they're actually ephemeral. And so if I double down on that, well, okay, I want to be a leader. I call myself a leader. This is one of my ironies at work. It's like leader is really what someone else calls you.
Mhm.
It, 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 I mean, I know people, if they were to move, I want to know where they move to. If I'm in the workplace, in corporate world, or in a particular career, and I relate to how they work, I want to know where they move to because I want to work with that person.
Mhm.
And they may be a peer, but to me, they're a leader because you admire what they do.
Right.
And we do have the karma with some people that it's very easy for us to admire them because of their good qualities, their qualities of humility but then it's going back to then our potential. Well, if we're not a fixed being, then we should aspire to be like that.
Mhm.
Someone who does cruise through life, they seem to get things just go. Their projects seem to be on time, but and again we get very focused on like, well, what is the I have to challenge myself a little bit not to talk about this in the workplace because it's too much for some people. But root cause analysis,
Mhm.
self. You get down to it. It's self and grasping at self, and the degree to which you grasp at self is the degree to which things aren't going to work.
Right.
It,
And
it's
the thinking about your potential is very different from that because you like you were saying, you're not seeing yourself in some kind of fixed way, like I am this and I have this. And it's difficult within that then to see your potential because you are already this. And how do I then, and that person, is the leader that I want to be. And that's where like that kind of jealousy comes from, is that them over there like that, me over here like this, but we don't realize we're creating that whole dynamic in our mind
yeah,
through the
yeah.
way we're thinking about it. And so I like what you're saying, and we need to be able to, yeah, not, I guess, believe those as they come up, but also see what we could be, and then ask, I guess, how do you create that? That's the how do I, like you're saying, if you want to be a leader, you need to rejoice, feel happy in other people's good qualities that are, they have those
And
leadership qualities.
increasingly in a world of the tools that are, we've all got used to search. I've met people who like they've said, I've made a great career for the last 20 years Googling things. So with AI coming along as well, soft skills and even common sense, I mean, basic common sense is so important. You and I have talked about this in other times. So those soft skills, that empathy, that thinking outside the box. We can't think outside the box if we can't see the box.
Yeah.
That's how it begins. And our mind is the box, that we're in. And so I see myself as this fix. I've got this, as opposed to if we really start to get down to root cause of and I'm going to sound a little bit worldly for a moment, the root cause of my lack of career growth or, not reaching my career goals is always worldly. It's always crunchy. It's always insurmountable. It's like, well, I don't have the right skills, training, experience, contacts, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
As opposed to I'm not identifying my potential. My potential is no different from that person that I admire or the
Right.
person I'm jealous of. They want to avoid suffering and be happy.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get to know people and you're like, oh my goodness, I have it so easy compared to you. I mean, I've met people who've overcome the most incredible personal family situations, health situations, et cetera, and people adore them and would, bend over backwards to help them
Yeah.
in what is ultimately a mundane mission in the company, maybe, but they're just but the human interaction is so close. They just adore that person, and they're like, I would be happy working for so and so.
Yeah. 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 Hmm. It's interesting. The topic the point you brought up, there's so many points in there. I had ideas on, but the one about AI and how it's it's basically like leveling up. Like I've said this to my team before, like a junior engineer with like GitHub Copilot and AI coding assistant is like a mid-level, maybe even a senior engineer. And
Yep.
so it makes I find it interesting when you're saying like soft skills actually become much more important. Like, is that person um you know, easy to work with? Like, are they a
Yep.
genuinely like nice person that I can get along with? That's if the skill gap is closed out by some of this like evolving tools, which continue to evolve, then that everything about, like we're saying, the mental attitude, the emotional like soft skills that you get through something like a meditation practice where you
Yep.
learn to be insightful, you learn to see how your mind works and how your interactions with others are completely dependent on the way you think, the way you view them. That's going to become increasingly important. I mean, it already is very important, but it seems like with the skill gaps closing in all sorts of careers and industries, that's going to become even more important.
And I think soft skills is something that is sort of people often stop at the. I mean, I know you described it. Am I nice to get along with? Et cetera, et cetera. And there's people. There is. We tend to assign roles to that, like this person is very empathetic. Some people like, I really love this person working with them because they're very direct, and sometimes we don't actually equate being direct with being spiritual,
Mhm.
being having a spiritual life, or being open-hearted. For some people, it's actually quite difficult to have a conversation to say, like, Francis, did I offend you in the meeting today? And sometimes you get an answer like, why would you say that? Oh, I just felt like I might have said the wrong thing. And it's a totally a bonding point.
Right.
But for some people, that's very difficult.
Sure. The
Uh,
emotional intelligence aspect of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's quite the buzzword. People
Of
love to
course.
throw whatever the latest business buzzwords are, and if this is recorded, it'll probably seem very antiquated, or maybe in a year even, or 6 months. But it's just that honesty of like, I'm no different to you. You do this, I do this. I've got to do this to help everybody move forward, and you've got to do that for everybody to move forward. To me, that's when hierarchy starts to fade away, and cherishing others, which is definitely a core Buddhist spiritual practice, comes in. I mean, I'm fortunate to work with people who are, the high echelon of a corporation and over multiple engagements, and they really want to, like, how are you? I mean, not how's the job going? How are you?
Hmm.
They have skip level one-on-ones and that kind of
Yeah.
thing, and they really want to know how people are doing as opposed to looking at a survey.
Right. That's a
That
unique quality to have. I had a boss recently and he would always ask people at the start of a meeting, he would ask, "How is everyone doing? Like,
Yeah,
how are you feeling this week about the state of things, what's going on?" And I found that very interesting. I feel like people really appreciated, cherished, like trusted that person a lot more because, there's that saying, like, someone doesn't know how much you know until they know how much you care. Right.
yes,
Like
yeah,
and when you ask someone like, how are you doing? And you genuinely want to know the answer, they know that you care. And then, of course, if this person's working with you, they want to help you, or if they're on your, someone that reports to you on your team, then they feel like appreciated and they feel like more engaged from that cherishing.
yep. And it's a two-way street because having empathy for someone who is in a quote unquote leadership role, and they what they have to accomplish and what they're accountable for. And the fact that, I mean, I worked with one CEO of a multi-billion dollar company, and I just got the feeling every week that he was working for me. He was like out there working for me, and I was just working at that company. It's like, wow, messages from different. He would do a like a newsletter, flying
Mm,
all over the world doing this kind of stuff, and these guys really working hard,
yeah.
and so it's this connectedness, and this goes again back to that really simple thing. And I want to get into it a little bit. How do we actually get traction on that? That simple thing of, like, when I walk into work in the morning, or I connect to work in the morning,
Yeah.
who am I? And just getting that stack. I've had the good fortune over many years to meet people where, you can explain these things, and then you see them a little while later, and you're like, wow, you get it better than I do. They've
Mhm.
implemented it. So I sometimes call it the icing on the cake. I've met people with their circumstances that it wouldn't be hard to be jealous of their circumstances. There's just their financial security and good health, and all the things that quote unquote are the trappings of modern life that people aspire to.
Mhm.
I'm leaving that minus the spiritual life. And then, they will find a path like Buddhism, and they find, like, it's so, there's no dogma, and there's so much self-discovery and identifying with their potential. It becomes like the icing on the cake. It's like, things were good, but something was kind of missing. I've got pretty much all the stuff in the colored magazine, and everything's great. Still wasn't quite there. Great relationship, great partner, good health, all the things, that people
Yeah.
tell you need in modern life. And then, they find, like, Buddha's teachings, and the simplicity and the clear presentation of modern Buddhism, and it's like the icing on the cake. But over a period of time, the cake and the icing change place. And that's when it really works. So their spiritual life becomes the basis, and all the other stuff sits on top of it.
Mm.
And now they actually get to they get really start to get that enjoyment that the advert in the magazine said you would get if you drove that car,
Right.
because they're no longer attached to it. They're actually enjoying the car, which again can be the great cause of jealousy from other people, unfortunately. But it's the spiritual life, and anyone can do that because anyone can change their mind.
Yeah.
So the real traction. So Kadam Lucy James as well. I love this. This is one of these, and we have many of them in Kadampa Buddhism. These you don't, for me personally, you don't have any excuse, Angus. Now you've heard this experiences. So she once said, this is Kadam Lucy James said, anyone can practice rejoicing. You can do it as soon as you wake up, lying in your bed. And it's like, I almost feel like, well, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't have an excuse. I can lie in bed. I can take up my phone and totally distract myself and decide that that's the state of the world that appears on my phone. Or I could just spend a few minutes rejoicing. So I haven't even done a formal practice or a meditation. Just lie in bed and just rejoice in the
Like
fact that,
appreciating things in your
yes,
life, appreciating people's good qualities. What kind of things do you do?
everything. So we're keeping this a little bit, work-life balance focused.
Yeah.
Beginning though with that foundation, like I'm waking up, I'm waking up. I really am. I'm waking up and I'm alive. And maybe I want to get a cup of coffee. Maybe I have a slight headache or something like that, or a cup of tea. But I'm alive and I'm awake, and I've got work, or I've got family, or I've got friends. I've got people who live here. I didn't wake up, wondering where I am. These kinds of things. And so, whatever you want to rejoice in, and then starting to think about, look, if you took a step back, there are so many people who would be jealous of your life. We spend no time looking at other people's lives. They would be like, I want to wake up like France. I want to just have that smile on my face. And this is where we have to make that choice. Are we identifying with our potential to be
Hmm.
that person? Or
Yeah.
are we going to identify with our so-called lack of potential?
Right. Interesting.
Well, I'm not a guy. Well, I'm a guy, you can tell on the screen, but they might think, okay, well, it's okay for a man. So I've divided the population in half at that point. And we can just go down that path infinitely of all the reasons why I can't be you. Well, I'm not going to be you directly, but why I can't be happy. And
Yeah.
so if we take a step back, and the reason I'm saying that is if people look even at their job, at their family situation, there are people who would just be so happy if they had that.
Hmm.
And that is the practice of rejoicing.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
if we learn to love our spiritual life, this is probably the most wrathful thing I ever heard from one of the most gentle teachers I ever knew. Very light, very easygoing teacher. And he said, learn to love your spiritual life or you'll quit. And that was like the most wrathful. I don't think I heard him say anything as wrathful as that, but it was so true and
Yeah.
quite direct. And if we love our spiritual life, then every moment is going to be a joy. It's not going to be work.
Right.
So I think the key thing is work. What one person considers work, the other person bounces out of bed to do.
Hmm.
And so if it is so at the end of the day, we might have aspirations to be an athlete. Sooner or later, we've got to engage in some athletic activity to be an athlete. We want to be happy. We need to change our mind. What do we do? So then we look for instructions.
Yeah.
And Buddha has, and particularly the Lam Rim of Atisha in Kadampa Buddhism is like, I don't know, the Tony Robbins of the 14th century, Anthony Robbins. It's just so clear. So do these steps and
Yeah.
you'll get the results. So
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. The thing that is really coming across to me from what you said there is there's both in the workplace but also just in life there's a culture of not appreciating what we have. Like you go on Instagram and you see like uh all those shiny moments. This happened to me today. There was someone I know and I saw this picture with them with their family and I was just like, that's so nice, look at that, like they're just enjoyed their family and traveled all year. And then and then I was walking later and I saw a family in the street and the children were just like crying and being, and you just remember with Instagram, like it's the snapshots of the best, and it's not a representation of reality, but we see it and we think, oh, if I just had that. And we do it in our careers too. We
Yeah.
think, if I just had that title or that position or that pay or that project that I wanted, I would be happy. And we're, just it's just an active misconception that all of these things outside of us are needed to make us happy, and we just never get there because that list only gets added to the more we
Exactly.
scroll, or the more, even if we get higher up, there's always somewhere else to be. And so we're just always on this it's like the rat race, we call it, in the
Yep.
workplace, but we do that in life too. We're just chasing endlessly where there for happiness, or we can't actually find it because we just want more.
And you're leading to a really, really important point for me, and that is we postpone our happiness.
Mm.
So because instead of engaging in those practices right now, like I'm just going to get up this morning, I'm going to do 15 minutes of breathing meditation. I, 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 I can't do a formal practice or whatever reason we have. I'm just going to do 15 minutes of breathing meditation. And we go about our day, but we form that foundation, and then hopefully the subtle effect of that would be that we would remember that as we walk into work, that okay, I'm a spiritual being. I kind of began the day with some breathing meditation that most people didn't, and everything just flows from there. But the bigger implication is we always want to get to the point where it's like, well, okay, if I get the promotion without too much responsibility and I get the right amount of disposable income, then I could go on that spiritual retreat. And you've been around a long time and you must have heard this many, many times. So why? What are we waiting for? Why? Again, another Kadam Morton quote. It's like we're holding onto the side instead of swimming. It's like, well, I'd like to swim over there, but I'm kind of holding, and I can swim, but I'm kind of holding on the side because that's just what I do, and it's sort of a comfort zone, as opposed to like, I'm just going to swim, because how long are the conditions going to be like this that I could just swim across and the water's smooth if it's like tidal water or something like that. So we're waiting for the perfect conditions, whereas again, from the ancient teachings translated into the modern teachings, we have the perfect conditions right now.
Mhm.
The perfect conditions to practice patience are with that coworker. The perfect condition to overcome jealousy is to see someone else's success and then just, okay, make it a little bit of effort today to rejoice. But you know what? It really does work. So the other irony to that is effort. The word effort to a lot of people, like, well, it does sound like effort. I got to get up early, got to meditate a little bit. I mean, I like the idea of meditation, but it sounds like effort. I would counter that with the fact that we are making enormous effort every day to be happy. We just have to ask ourselves, and it's a tough question, are we being successful at it?
Right.
Are we actually successful? Am I happier today than I was 6 months ago? Am I really making progress? Or we look at our day and say, there's a little, if we're honest with ourselves, being a little gentle, there's a little room for improvement. I could have a little bit of improvement. And then we open the door then to our potential.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I was just thinking as you're saying that the sort of like gauge of happiness, of which there is many. Of course, the main one just being, is our mind happy?
Yeah.
Which is the only real gauge of it. But I was thinking that the amount of desires we have and wishes we have is directly proportional actually to our level of discontent and unhappiness. So it's like
Yes.
when we're asking, am I happy? There has to be some kind of one like mind thinking about, what is really going to make me happy? What do I really desire? And then there has to be some wisdom in there, understanding, like we were talking about before, just like the self underlying that sort of needs all of these different things in my life in order for me to finally reach this end state of happiness, like that self. We were just studying this in our teacher training program here with Gadam Morton, and the teachings on self cherishing, and it's just so clear, like that self can never be happy. That self that needs XYZ, it
The,
just
the
can't
self
be
that's drinking the
happy.
seawater to quench its thirst. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. The more we get, the more we want. And we just have to recognize that self, which we are, of course, it's a very Buddhist concept. We're always thinking about who am I? How am I identifying myself? It's something so unique to Buddhism, but it's so fundamental, especially in this regard. Like without realizing that self is just flawed, and I don't need to identify as that. And there's a new way I can think about myself. um I think that's so key to actually make that change. Otherwise we feel like we're sort of like battling ourself
Yeah.
and our desires, which is just we're never going to win that battle because it's
And
a battle of
again,
ignorance.
it doesn't require, with clear presentation of Buddha's teachings, it doesn't require a leap of faith. It's logical as well. And of course, the danger is it just remains intellectual. It doesn't actually change our heart and our sort of more inner being. But logically, you can go through clear teachings that, like, I can't actually find the self that I'm cherishing. So, but I cherish it every day. And I, pet it and try to get all the things that would make it happy.
Yeah.
And I wanted to return a little bit to the zero sum game again. When we just throttle back a little, things actually start to become creative ideas come, different ways of looking at things come. We broaden our mind. Another quote from Kadam Lucy James, Mahayana Buddhists in particular, she was talking about Mahayana Buddhists are big thinkers. They think future lives and past lives, not just even this life and this career, or, what am I going to do till I'm 45 or whatever it happens
Yeah,
to be.
all living beings as extensive as space.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty large. That's big thinking.
I,
So
I know.
when we think outside the box, then you become that. And again, being very careful here not to encourage. If I practice spiritual life, I'll become worldly successful, because it's kind of juxtaposed. But the the creative thinking that comes with it then creates that differentiator. And hopefully you're working in a role that benefits others, and you can see where your role works to benefit others, helps people. Anybody who observes you and wonders why you don't get stressed, they want to know why, and then they make their decision that I need to follow the spiritual path, whatever their spiritual path is. They can be inspired by you even to return to the spiritual path of their childhood, whatever it happens to be. But that outside of the box thinking in a world that's becoming homogenized through AI, and, like, can someone come up with an idea they didn't Google, that they didn't ask Copilot for, because I could just do that myself, and people are like, well, standard practice says we should be doing this. Yeah, but we all typed the same thing into our computers and got the same result. But then there's the one person who says, well, what about this? Wow, who'd have thought of that? But come to think of it, it's not about, where'd you get that from? Well, I thought outside the box.
Right.
Well, how'd you? Oh, yeah, but France can think outside the box. I can't. Why? Because I'm identifying with my lack of potential. you know? So there's an irony, going back to what you said about sense of self. When you let go of that sense of self, you, in essence, become fearless. Fear is based on self. You become fearless. You're willing to speak up.
Hmm.
Cherishing others doesn't mean becoming a doormat. There's many, very many
Right.
clear teachings on that. And then somebody said, I like that France guy. I like because he came up with an idea nobody else, and he spoke up as well. But
Yeah.
he wasn't, beating his chest and pushing his way to the front. He just waited for the appropriate moment. So what about this? And you're like, oof,
Yeah.
your words had power.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I was just thinking about the one thing you said, like if we don't want to speak up, that's, there's in our mind, there's like this preservation or protecting of a shy self, right?
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
people will say, oh, I'm shy and I don't like doing that. And it's just it actually, I don't think it takes a lot of wisdom, but it does take some to think like that shy self is just an appearance to the mind. Like it's not real in any way. And I'm actually free to not identify with it. And if you don't want to be have a shy self or identify with having a shy self, you have to learn and make habits to be some other self, like a self
yeah.
that's confident in speaking up, a self that is happy and willing to do that, a self that is, skillful in doing that. And you have to identify yourself in a new way. And all of that, the interesting thing is all of that is mental process. It's just like thinking about yourself differently, identifying yourself differently. And yeah, I love this theme of like a zero sum game. Like it's not about am I shy or am I not
Yeah.
shy? There's always in between solutions. And especially if we have wisdom, we have like different ways of looking at it, new ways of identifying yourself. And I think this goes back to the point about potential you were making. It's all like, who can we be? And then how are the actions and ways I'm thinking about myself today taking me to that person that I want to be?
And I can challenge myself. If I have an idea that could be beneficial and I don't speak up, can I really say I care about other people?
Mhm.
So it can be quite so it's a strange kind of self-cherishing shyness is. But I never encourage people to just suddenly come out of their shell and be something they don't feel they are. Like, oh, I'm going to do presentations in front of lots of people now and learn
Yeah.
public speaking. I'm just I don't really have that karma. I just want to make a difference.
Mm.
Personally, actually, that goes at the top of my resume, and that is my number one thing. And if I feel like I'm not making a difference, it's time to move on.
Right.
My other mindset is there's always something better I could be doing.
Yeah.
That better thing is being of value. It's being of value to others,
Yeah,
and then
making
you
an impact, changing people's lives for the better.
exactly. But that's the benchmark. It's not the title. It's not this. It's in this role. Am I able to benefit others?
Yeah.
And if an opportunity comes up where I could have more, be of more benefit, you'll take that.
Right.
A humble monk like Geshe Gelsen Gyatso Rinpoche could have stayed on retreat in a hut in the Himalayas or something like that.
Yeah.
But then, and both you and I have heard him say, I developed the confidence to make a good presentation. That floors me, in front of 6,000 people as he says that. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, you pretty much got it.
Yeah.
But the presentation being made is not about self, is it? It's about other.
Right.
So you don't actually have to build up. And so this is where Buddhism is actually different to everyday life. So Genla Dekion, our most senior teacher in our tradition, has a wonderful phrase. She and I've heard her say this a couple of times in slightly different ways. Kadampa Buddhism is not different from everyday life. It is everyday life.
Hmm.
That's where we practice it is in everyday life. And she's talked a lot recently about, quoting Geshe-la, about the amount of time we have off the cushion. If we don't integrate stuff into our daily life, our spiritual life into our daily life, there just isn't time to practice.
Right.
I heard a quote from Genla Tubton once, where Geshe-la had said, in the old days, back in Tibet, many people had families, farmed, stuff like that, but lived deeply spiritual lives.
Hmm.
So in some respects, nothing's changed. We
Yeah.
don't farm, we ride the subway, and we work in front of a computer or whatever it happens to be, or we do
Yeah.
healthcare in a hospital with windows and air conditioning and stuff. But we can live a deeply spiritual life. And just there, the impact of someone, you take your dog to the vet, you take your child or your partner or family member to the hospital, and someone just has that heart.
Yeah.
They bring their spiritual life to work, and you just feel like it's going to be okay. They say it's going to be okay. Someone says, "You'll be fine." It didn't touch me. The other person looks at you and says, "It's going to be okay," and you feel it.
Right.
And that is the ultimate soft skill. It's not that they're super, they could be quite direct, like, ma'am, sit down, it's going to be okay. And you feel better. That's not really soft and cuddly. That is cherishing you in that moment
Yeah.
because they bring their spiritual life and they integrate it in their daily life.
Yeah. Very nice. How about I'm curious your thoughts. One of the things I look for as a spiritual practitioner with a day job is like business things that align with the spiritual practice. So I'll give you an example, like the concept of servant leadership,
Hmm.
where I'm leading a team, but my job is not to like, tell people what to do. It's to enable people to do what they're interested in. It's to support people in what they do, and um, give them challenges to continue to grow. And so I'm curious, are there any sort of like business concepts like this that you found that help enhance your spiritual practice or like really gel with it?
I think faith, but I've got to qualify the word faith. Faith coming from logic and experience, which is Buddhist definition of faith. So I'm imagining you in that role, as well as myself, but it's easier to talk about you, even though we don't work together. But, to empower people, it means it's the Bodhisattva's aspiration. For me, at one point, it was a challenge because the Bodhisattva wishes to work quietly in the background. How does that go down in a noisy workplace where so and so's solved it again? The heroics in a company are not a good sign. That means that something went wrong and someone had to sail in and save the day. I've challenged leadership in some companies to ask them, do you have team awards? Because you seem to award individuals, the rugged individual. I heard one person present that even at some of the seminars I go to, business seminars. If they last more than a day, they start to get spiritual. Because after that, people start to talk about what are we doing, why are we doing it, and what it means
Right.
to be at work. It's quite interesting. It doesn't take long. It can be a room full of geeks,
Yeah.
and it starts to become spiritual. So that empowering people or don't have to get recognized as well. So zero sum game starts to come back in. It's like we can't fully embrace other.
Mhm.
I've heard this said actually. Someone I was discussing. It was one of our study program discussion groups once upon a time, and someone said, "Well, you got to keep a little bit back for yourself." And I said, I
Yeah.
can see why you say that. Didn't
Yeah.
mean I was agreeing. Sometimes my empathy is a little too. I've worked on it. Maybe it's just my words, but I sound like I'm agreeing, but I'm actually not. I said, but I disagree. If you cherish others, you will, first of all, outside of work, you'll take care of your health. You'll
Yeah.
make sure your bills are paid. You'll make sure your car's serviced. You'll go to the gym. Do all those things that it takes to maintain that emanation that you are. You'll take care of those things out of cherishing others. Again, it's very subtle change. And
Yeah.
so in the workplace, if you don't explain what you've done, like you as a leader, again, I'm hypothesizing here. Fortunately, I don't work with you, so I'm not breaking any non-disclosures or whatever. But if you as a leader are always empowering people, and rarely we get feedback. People say, France is really easy to get on with. Like I haven't had a boss like France before. Maybe it's that Buddhist thing. I don't know. But he's easy to get on with. But they don't tell you that because that takes a lot of emotional intelligence to do. So you don't necessarily get feedback. And that's where faith starts to kick in because you understand that if I do the right thing will happen.
Mm.
The fundamental understanding of cause and effect and karma.
Right.
And sometimes in the short term, like, hey, I look like I'm not even necessary on this team anymore. I'm the so-called leader of this team. And it could be a technical leader, a people leader, whatever it happens to be on whatever work that we work in. And so, we start to feel like superfluous, like, well, I'm just showing up and now I've become like the manager who gets paid. And what do you actually do, France? But if they took you out of the equation, the team wouldn't even function.
Right.
And so it does take a little faith, but also to know the appropriate people to indicate what you do, because if you don't, we're also not giving feedback. So if you don't, it doesn't mean to say that you have to gather a bunch of folks together once a month and tell them how great you are. That's a little difficult to pull off as a bodhisattva, that aspiration to be a servant leader, should we say. But if you tell the appropriate people, I've done this, 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 and this, I've done this, 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 and this, you're giving them feedback.
Yeah.
And if we don't do that, we're again from karma, and no one gives us our karma. We're creating it. If we don't do that, then we're creating the causes to not get feedback ourselves.
Yeah.
And then you never want to get to that position where someone says, I love working with your friends. And you're like, oh, great, finally some feedback. Yeah. But I got this other job and I'm leaving. Oh, things like that don't tend to happen overnight. They tend to happen over a period of time. It builds up, it builds up, it builds up,
Yeah.
and they leave. And so because of that lack of connection and feedback, so if we're not creating the causes to give feedback ourselves to the appropriate people,
Yeah.
with humility, then we're creating the causes not to get feedback ourselves, and then therefore, like steering a ship, we're not either empathetic or seeing someone's aspirations. We see someone really getting ahead, and we've got to let them run with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. It's understanding, it's an interesting thing, like understanding how people perceive you is so
Mhm.
important, and getting that feedback and understand, especially if there is some challenging thing, or even if there's not, because you want to make sure you're working well with that person.
Yeah,
And that's, that again, it's giving feedback, receiving feedback can be a hard thing, but it's like we've been talking about, it's an aspect of cherishing another person. You want them to be successful, you want them to thrive. And um, I was thinking like that comment you made about somebody in a discussion, can we really like cherish every people completely? Don't we have to keep something for ourselves? And it just made me think like, being a leader of teams, I often think like the teams are an extension of myself, right? Like in that way, it's my job to cherish them, and just like I would myself. And like specifically to giving credit, for example, like
Mhm.
if I'm a good leader, generally I'm giving credit to the team who did the work. Now I might have, steered them in a direction, but I'm steering a lot of teams in a direction, and doing that through cherishing, thinking of them myself, but they're the ones actually doing it. It's interesting because, we have this concept in Buddhism of like deluded pride, because you could think, oh,
Yeah,
like, look at all the work I'm doing, but
yeah,
no, no one ever does work in like independently, even if you're
yeah,
an individual contributor, you're still depending on so many other people and
yeah,
factors to do a job, that mind is just never valid. And it goes back to what you were saying before about like rejoicing,
yeah.
appreciating, thinking of the kindness of these people that enable me to do my job. It's a completely different attitude. And from that point of view, if then you ask, do I need to keep a little bit for myself? It doesn't really make sense,
Yeah.
because it's like why have a little bit of selfishness when you don't need to? But again,
Right.
people need like a vision of what that can be, and an understanding that like you said, you need some faith that that's going to work for you.
Which
And
comes from experience. I mean, you know,
for sure.
you're not new to what you do, neither am I. So you've gone through that, and you've known that there's times where you questioned it a little bit, which is again that actually builds faith for Buddhists anyway.
Yeah.
Questioning builds faith,
Yeah.
and so you like, I'm doing the right thing, so I do have faith that that good karma from doing the right thing is going to ripen, and then later on you see it and you're conscious of it. You're aware, and then it encourages you, and you get on a positive track. The
Yeah.
opposite to that in general in life. You must have heard the phrase, trouble comes in threes or something like that. Once we start seeing problems, we just see problems. Once we see opportunities, I've met entrepreneurs who make money out of things that I could never make money out of. Because you work in work and you come across people who are leaders of companies, and you're like, I couldn't see that because I just don't have that karma.
Right.
And I don't really have that passion or that interest, but they saw an opportunity in what was a mess. You
Yeah.
know, we need someone who, because, and you hear business leaders say that. And so but again, if it's a selfish grasping, it's probably not going to be successful. If it's I can clean that up and make things better, it probably will be.
Mhm.
So to me, we've talked a lot about how we can implement these things in the workplace. And again, there's always a danger. Again, the sense of self that keeps creeping in. Almost everything we talked about, you can see where self would undermine that wish to succeed. And then we can intellectually understand. We can even look for a self with intellect and not find it, etc. And becomes a cerebral practice. How do we get it to a heart practice? And to me, that goes back. to the fundamentals of having a daily practice. So I don't work with you, but I've known you a long time, and I appreciate your fundamental daily practice, your sort of unwavering daily practice. You just get it done.
Yeah.
And so if I wanted to improve my health, my physical health, I might say, okay, I'm not gonna do radical diet. I'm just gonna do this every day, this little bit of exercise every day, get my steps in, whatever it happens to be, whatever
Right.
the modern pop thing is, and I'm gonna eat this every day. And then, yeah, someone sees you a couple of years later, like you're looking really well,
Yeah.
physically. If we take care of our mental health in the same way, if we just say, I'm just gonna do this every day. Now, the people who stick at a diet or an exercise love it.
Yeah.
Love it. For me, I love to run. You might not think it if you saw me and the look on my face, but I'm loving it. I'm loving the challenge that
Yeah.
this is as my sense of self gets challenged.
Yeah.
I know people you eat with them and they love broccoli, like people love unhealthy donuts, whatever it happens to be. They just love that. If you love your spiritual practice, that is the key thing, and it
Yeah.
becomes part of your life, and it becomes that foundation. And again, going back to Kadam Lucy James, it doesn't get easier than lying in bed rejoicing. And from that rejoicing, you think, okay, well, I rejoice in their success. What's the next thing? I want them to be happy.
Yeah.
Now, we're right at that cusp at that point there, if we're familiar with it, unfortunately, where the zero-sum game comes in. It's like, okay, but there's them happy and there's me happy. Them and me, and there's only so much happiness to go around, as opposed to like, you know what? I'm going to do more than rejoice. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to meditate on everybody being successful or
Yeah.
everybody being happy and the end to everybody's problems. And of course, there's more specific meditations than that we can compress into a very small amount of time,
Yeah.
as long as it's effective. And then we do that on a daily basis, and everything just starts to flow. Everything just
Yeah.
starts to click into
Totally agree.
place.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I love how you frame the meditation practices as mental health and like it's all about that. And I it's such a popular topic this day, but I
Yes.
I almost feel like I don't know, a little bit sorry for most people who are interested in it because Buddhism has this like, 2,500 year head start
Yeah, it
on
does.
mental
Yeah.
health. And people, they'll turn to, I don't know, like an app like Headspace or talk to a therapist, which are great. It's like a great entry point, but then they'll try meditation and they'll think, oh, it's hard. And
Yeah.
you like you said, about the person who's eating healthy and they love eating broccoli and they
Yeah.
don't like donuts is like the opposite. And it's the same with meditation. Like it definitely takes training, but so does going to the gym. So does
There's
anything.
science behind it, though, isn't there?
Oh, for sure. There's
Yeah.
definitely science behind it. And the richness of Buddha's teachings and mental health. Like you're mainly talking about, well, we've talked about a lot of meditations here,
Yeah.
like rejoicing, which is appreciating others and the good qualities that we have, other people have, good conditions we have, and then cherishing other people. Like these are just simple, practical meditations, but they're so fundamental for mental
Yeah.
health and being in, like we're talking about, just the ability to be happy without depending on anything else outside of you. I I don't think there's any other like tool set nowadays you can run into that is as robust and rewarding and as practical as you'll find in these teachings.
And presented that we can practice. It's not like we've got to go learn Sanskrit or Pali or Tibetan or something like that. It's
Yeah.
it's it's in many, many languages. I can say our
Yeah.
language. We'd
Yeah.
speak in one language here, but I mean, it could be the hour can apply to anyone. I mean, it's that practicality of that practice every day.
Yeah.
And the analogy is, I think, with the apps that you mentioned, it's like, that's it, I want to get fit, and we get an app and we fade out. Buddha taught many things. First of all, you reminded me on what you just said. Buddha said, I prostrate to the new moon, not the full moon.
Yeah.
So yeah, these great realizations of like, wow, I can see the emptiness of all things, or I can cherish all living. But that's great, but it begins with learning to cherish others, which begins with that annoying security guard at the door when you go into work. If
Yeah.
I could learn to cherish them, I can, and it's that entry point. That's what Buddha meant
And
with
Buddha
that.
saying those are the valuable things. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's that entry point, and the same thing with the sort of apps. They become an entry point.
Right.
But Buddha also said rely on the three jewels, which is Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, which we can translate to for many people to be a qualified spiritual guide, a teacher, valid teachings, and spiritual friends.
Yeah.
But it's so
Yeah,
Sangha.
people you can have discussions like this with.
Yes, exactly. Sanskrit word
Yeah.
Sangha, but it actually means. And now there's an analogy there. Again, all analogies will break down eventually, but there's statistically, scientifically, they say, whatever app you do, if you train, if you go to the gym with a workout partner, you will be that much more successful. And it's just
Yeah.
been done again and again and again, repeated. That's what science is. It
Yeah.
repeats, doesn't
Like
it?
accountability to what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, if for a mundane aspiration of improving our health of this life, if we it proves that the connection with spiritual friends then helps everybody. I mean, it will help you. It will help you stay on that path
Yeah.
and have someone to turn to. So that's a challenge, and we only go as far as we can manage. I mean, again, you don't say, okay, I managed to swim 10 meters now. I got my 10-meter badge. I think I'm going to swim the English Channel. That would be a little bit of a foolish aspiration, I think. But as we learn to cherish others, we can expand. We can expand. There's certainly, like, I'm a little out of my depth there, and use common sense. Like, this person, they just really do rub me the wrong way. I know I'll get there eventually, but I have to limit my exposure to that person. That's common sense, and
Yeah.
that's usually where a good spiritual friend. Well, first of all, a good spiritual friend will never join a pity party. They'll listen because you're just talking and probably won't listen to them, so they'll listen. You're a great friend, France. And they, on top of that, then they may offer advice that will not encourage you to go to a pity party.
Yeah.
And then eventually you go away and you're like, they're right. They're right. They didn't say much, but they're kind of right. They've just venting that has reminded me that that person really, I don't know what's going on with them, and I don't know why they behave like they behave. I take it personally, but the strongest they got was to agree, like, yes, that person can be difficult. Maybe it's your manager. Yes, I understand that person can be difficult, and I'm working. This is as much as you're going to get from a manager. This kind of things. I'm working with them. Oh, well, maybe they've got something going on in their life that I'm completely unaware of. But again, my strong sense of self that I can carry through the door if I want to suffer, it made me think it was about me,
Right.
and they're just unkind to me. But I realized that and all the answers, as you said, to everything there are all in Buddhist teaching. It's 2,500-year head start. As a person of science, and Buddha's teachings are science, they are peer reviewed. The beautiful thing is that we peer review them. You put the teaching into practice. Does it
It's
work? If it
true.
doesn't, you
You
go
would
back, you
have
say,
said to peer review it yourself.
yeah, it's like, I've heard of people withdrawing papers because other scientists couldn't repeat it. And they're like, well,
Right.
we checked it and double checked it. But if you can't repeat it and you're a reputable scientist, we're going to have to look at it again and then republish it. Well,
Yeah.
we peer review Buddha's teachings. If it doesn't work for us, we go back and say, well, what am I doing wrong? Because I'm not getting that result. It's peer reviewed, and it's repeatable. Science is repeatable. It's not like, well, yeah, but there's a special case there. It's like, no, you do this. You wake up in the morning, you rejoice. It might take some effort, but that's my point earlier. Is it's a fraction of the effort that you would put in to your ordinary life trying to become happy. If
Exactly.
5 minutes of lying in bed, rejoicing, whatever it happens to be,
Yeah.
get us there.
Yeah. Exactly. Awesome. Any final thoughts, final points you wanted to share?
It's really that two main points I think I've been bouncing around, and one is that life is not necessarily a zero-sum game. When people talk about work-life balance, it's not or work or family, spiritual, like all these. It's not ours. It's when one works well, the other will work well. If your spiritual life starts to work well, your work life gets better. Your work life gets better, you have more time for your spiritual life. Well, hang a second, that doesn't necessarily make sense. Like, if my work life goes well, I get promoted, I got to work more hours. That's if you keep the right intention. Again, Dekion says this. Your family will even say, "Go to that Buddhist meeting again. we like you after you've been to that. You're a little less difficult. So
Yeah.
that's when synergy starts to kick in. So it's avoiding the zero sum game and then just try to get things in the right order. If you just change the order in which you do things, the simple self view, I'm not even using Buddhist terminology, the simple self view of, am I this who does this, or am I this who does this?
Hmm.
Am I a spiritual being who performs the function of this? If we can hold that, we're quite a long way down the road.
Yeah.
I mean, just beginning the day with that, but if we remember it during the day, and then we can start to transform trigger points, like when we feel a little bit stressed at work. Okay, why am I stressed? First thought is that thing. Well, actually, it's because I'm not identifying with the fact that I'm a spiritual person who performs a function of this job. And if I can get back to that, in fact, I haven't even finished thinking about it when I've come up with a solution to the problem that was stressing me.
Yeah.
That's where synergy kicks in. So
Yeah.
that's my
Awesome.
summary.
I love it. And yeah, I definitely a lot of food for thought in here, like what self am I bringing to work? How am I identifying myself? How is that helping and getting in the way of my happiness? How can I
Yes.
what minds and versions of myself can I bring more to work? I think these are all like good takeaways for meditation. Want to contemplate and,
Absolutely. Yeah.
to figure
In
out like
certain,
yeah.
identifying minds that are worthless, like if a judgmental self arises, and I'm seeing this a little bit like, well, who did this?
Yeah.
Well, who did this? Me also. Okay, I didn't do the work that's not working, or I didn't not do the checking that didn't catch the work that was broken. Who did this? Me. I had that view. So if we take a step back, the judgmental mind has come from me. So we're not
Yeah.
seeing things the way we're not going to see opportunities for improvement. And that's it's ironic we're kind of ending on a common business parlance. Opportunities for improvement. It sounds like corporate speak. If it's words from, again, this is Geshe Kel saying, words from the mouth. If we just words from the mouth, pretty words, it's just
Yeah.
corporate speak. But if it comes from the heart, we genuinely see opportunities for improvement.
Yeah. And exactly. That's amazing. Cool. Thank you for taking the time and sharing your insights and yeah, I appreciate it.
My lived experience. It's a pleasure to talk to you, France.
Awesome. Thank
I
you.
look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon.
Likewise.